Hi, I'm John with Lake Tahoe Tai Chi, and welcome to this Tai Chi for Beginners series. In this video, we will be taking a more in-depth look at the Wuchi or square horse stance. It's a very common stance in a lot of traditional martial arts, but it's very important for the beginner for them to understand basic mechanics, principles, adjustments, and so forth. All right. So when you're beginning, you can start with this narrow stance, but like I said, it really depends on your comfort level. For most of my students that I teach, I always have them start in a very short stance and then work progressively wider. That way they understand that no matter what distance or what width you decide to start your Wuchi or square horse stance in, the principles still remain the same. Okay, so if you're talking about rooting, you are still rooting from this short of a stance, which could be the same here. All right, but this helps you understand from a very short stance, what the feeling is like, and not having to worry so much about, your leg shaking because you're too wide, or the discomfort. Sometimes students have that in their hips because they're not normally positioning their hips out that wide. Okay, sometimes that stance is just unfamiliar to them, or their body just tenses up because it's not relaxing, right? So you can definitely start in a shorter stance, and for this stance you can start with your feet straight forward, but in some forms as well too, they actually kick out the feet a little bit out of 45. This one is a little bit easier because your base is just opened up a little bit more, so you might feel like you have more stability, but regardless you still have the same rooting feeling. Knees are still bent, not going past the toes, and then hip is still tucked in to align the spine straight up and down. But you can definitely start in this type of stance along with this foot positioning. Okay, so now that you understand the, I would say the depth of the stance and basically how to adjust, like I said, you can start here or very wide, or start here and progressively work wider and wider. Now let's focus a little bit more on the feet. Okay, so a lot of instructors and a lot of classes I've been through have voiced out that rooting, yes, is a feeling of sinking, so like sinking your mind, or they talk about song, which is basically relaxing not only the body but also the mind as well too, so you feel that connection to the ground. But there's also something that you can do with your feet as well. If you're not familiar with it, then you should basically try it from a shorter stance. But this is definitely going to be helpful moving forward in your forms. If you're just beginning or if you're advanced, this tip can definitely help out as well too. So if we talk about the feet, right, sometimes we aren't barefoot all the time. It really depends on your normal everyday activities, but most of the time we have shoes on, so we kind of forget the feeling of wiggling our toes and moving them around for stability. So what you want to do is, if you want to kind of do this drill with me, is with your toes you should just kind of move them around up and down, and then what I would like you to do is kind of shift your weight forward so you feel the weight going to the ball of the feet. Obviously don't go too far forward to where it's not comfortable or you feel like you're going to lose your balance, but just kind of rock to where you feel the weight shift to the ball of the foot and the toes, and then kind of shift back, right, and then try to find that center. Now once you found that center to where your feet are basically, in front and back is centered, I would say 50-50, then what I'd like you to do is try to wiggle your toes and then grab the toes ever so slightly. Okay, not to where it's, really trying to cling on, but they just kind of pull themselves down to the ground. And then that's going to also help with the feeling of rooting as well, and also help with stability. Okay, so for instance, if you're moving and transitioning every time that you have the foot completely flat, sometimes if you don't have that grab of your foot, then if you shift, it might shift to the outside of the edge of the foot, and same thing might shift to the inside, or it might go too far forward, too far back, right, on your heel. So just doing that with your toes really helps you identify the center point within your feet. Okay, but what I tell all my students is just wiggle your toes first, shift forward a little bit, shift back, okay, play around it, get that feeling of where your center actually lies, and then once you feel right where your center is, then kind of slightly and gently grab with the toes, and then you should feel that you have a little bit more stability. Okay, so if I do this drill from the side, just from a neutral stance, here I am, and all I'm going to do is just do this, and I can feel the pressure on my toes, I can feel the pressure on my heels, and then you find that center, and then you just wiggle the toes, and it's just a slight connection to the ground, or Okay, so just grabbing with the toes. All right. Now, the same thing applies if you have your feet out. Okay, wiggle the toes, go forward, go back, and then slight grab. Okay, so you can do that with your feet straight forward or your feet out at a 45. All right, so now let's move on to the next part of the body, which is going to be the knee. Okay, so once you feel that you have stability within your feet, the next thing are the knees. Okay, so the knees, in the very beginning, you want to make sure that the knees never go past the toes, and you want to make sure that you really feel that centered positioning. Otherwise, you're going to have some pressure to the outside, inside, front, and that's something that we want to be aware of. That way we can adjust naturally and we don't prevent injury moving forward. Okay, so from a very high stance, your knees don't need to bend as much as a wider stance. So if I turn to the side from right here, here's my posture just straight up, right? I'm not grabbing. I start with the toes, there's the grab, and then from there, just a slight bend of the knees, okay? From that point, you should be able to look straight down and notice that your knees aren't going past your toes, but realistically from a high stance, just bending the knees right there should be more than enough, and you don't need to go too far forward. Okay, if you go too far forward, what's gonna start happening is even if you're going down, you're actually gonna put a lot of pressure on the front of the knee. And another tendency that I've noticed with some students is the more they go down, okay, sometimes they compensate and they start to roll to the front of the feet, and then it puts your knees in an even worse position. So just understand from a very high stance, when you start, just it's a slight bend in the knees, nothing crazy, but make sure you can look straight down and you'll notice that your knees don't go past the toes. All right. Now, if we're talking about the knees and we understand that, making sure they're not going past the toes, you definitely want to make sure you're starting with the feet first. And the reason for that is, like I mentioned before, is if you don't have that grabbing feeling or the feeling of rooting, and you're not doing that with your toes, what can happen sometimes is if you're shifting, or say that you're in this position and you don't grab with your toes and here's the bend, sometimes the bend actually will go outwards and students won't notice it, okay? And then it'll actually put pressure on the outside of the knee, okay? Not too much, but it will. And then you're gonna start to feel that some of the pressure will start going to the outsides of the feet, okay? Now from that point in time, you're not 50-50, you're not completely centered on your feet. Okay, so that's one thing to be aware of. Okay, another thing to be aware of is you bend, the tendency is also this, if you don't start with your feet, is where the knees will go in. And you have to remember, you know, when I explain this in class, students will perform it, but they won't actually pay attention too much because there's so much going on. But when you're able to practice at home and you take these tips and you're able to adjust and really look at your stance, these are some of the things you want to be aware of. So remember, once you bend your knees, you need to make sure that the feet are engaged. Otherwise, like I said, sometimes students do this and now it goes way too far outside, and then sometimes this happens because you know, naturally their knees are used to that. All right, so you just want to watch out for the pressure shifting inside of the foot and outside, okay? And it's the same thing here. Right? So if I bend my knees, sometimes this will happen, right? Okay, and sometimes this will happen, and then it will kick the butt out, right? And that's something that we just don't want in that stance. All right, so just remember, start with the feet and then adjust the knees, okay? For all my students, I always say start from ground and then go all the way up, all right? So that's basically the knee portion. If you decide to go to a wider stance, it's basically the same. Here's your wide stance, right? Start with the feet, okay? Make sure you're not doing this. Okay. Oh, and the other thing, yes, it does put pressure on your ankle, which is very uncomfortable. So make sure you don't do this, and then make sure, same exact thing and bend, that the knees don't do this. Okay, these are very common tendencies within class. So just make sure that you start with the feet, and then once you bend the knees, you should start to feel that you have, you know, even pressure all around your foot. All right, but the rooting feeling, you know, like I said, first there's the body mechanics, and then once you understand how to calm the mind and song a little bit more, then you can kind of adjust if, you know, say for instance, you aren't quite grabbing with the feet, but we can talk about that a little bit later on in a more advanced video. All right, but this is basically a wider stance, and you know, I'll go a little bit wider, same exact thing, okay? But this is basically it. So here's your Wuchi, but like I said, starting with the feet and then going to the knees. All right, remember, not this and definitely not this, okay? All right, so a drill for that is just to practice with your legs is you start here, okay, and then you can take a step out a little bit further and go, okay, this feels pretty comfortable. Feeling your weight, go a little bit further, and then try to go as wide as you possibly can. Just remember, all of it's within your comfort zone. Okay, so try to progressively work to a larger stance. All right. Next thing is your hips. Okay, so the hips, we basically have a natural curve along our spine. So just standing straight up, we touch our back, we can feel this lower curve here. All right. What we want to do is after we locked in the feet, right, we've adjusted the feet and we've adjusted the knees, is the next thing is what I usually have my students do is take the back of their hand and just run it down their back. And as they get to that point to where it starts to roll almost off the buttocks and where the tailbone sits, you want to think about taking the hips and tucking the pelvis in. Okay, so it rolls underneath. And then from that point, it should align your spine. And what you're thinking about is once you roll this, is you're trying to elongate the spine. And once this is straight, you're thinking about the spine pulling down to the ground. And then once you keep the posture upright, okay, the upper body along with the head and neck, you're thinking about this part opening up as well too. So the concept is to elongate the spine in both directions. Okay, some instructors say you can feel crackling and you can feel a lot of other things. Yes, you possibly can. It just depends on each individual, but it's not like a for sure thing. So just understand, try not to force it. Everything in Tai Chi is a gentle stretch. So this is the same exact thing in this posture. There's a lot of other movements too that students will do. And this is another one where it's an example of almost, you're hugging a tree, arms are nice and relaxed, but this is the same exact thing. They're working on the posture, but elongating the spine in both directions. So opening it up from within more than anything else, okay? So from the very beginning, like I said, start with the feet, then the knees, and then once you feel this, then roll that, okay? And then you should feel it tuck underneath. And then shoulders are just nice and relaxed. And then just chin is looking straight forward, okay? Some things that I have come up in class as well, are you gonna pull the back, the shoulders back? So basically doing this. No, you don't need to, because you're pulling the shoulders back by force, okay? Everything should be nice and relaxed. So this roundedness that I have in front is completely natural, and that's the posture that you want to have in Tai Chi. So, everyone talks about, okay, just walk with your back straight. It's not really the case in Tai Chi, okay? Yes, there'll be times to where you pull and you expand the chest, which also happens to take the back and pull it to where it straightens out, stretches as well. But you have to remember, there's a lot of motions that we go through, whether it be reaching forward and having this roundness within our body, or pulling the opposite way and stretching and opening up. So in the very beginning, don't think you have to be completely straight with your back. So for this instance, right, here's the pelvic tuck, right? Everything else is here. And then from this point, just keep everything nice and relaxed. And I always just like to keep my hands in front, okay, to keep that posture, because then you have this nice roundedness, okay, within the top frame. You're not trying to pull it back and straighten up, okay? Because then sometimes too, I've had students do that and they arch. So try to be very aware of that, but just nice and relaxed with the shoulders. But it all starts with a pelvic tuck and just making sure the spine is aligned and you feel that spine elongating. Okay, so just remember, it's a gentle stretch, all right? Kind of a couple things to help, I would say, enhance that feeling. Breathe with each, I would say just with each posture. Keep that posture and then try to relax deeper and deeper. That's the only thing. A lot of it has to do with your mind. So just leading your body with your mind and just telling it to relax and pull in both directions. So just remember, once you get in that posture, whether it be a short stance or even a long stance, okay, it's all the same, right? Start with the feet, bend the knees, hips tuck underneath, and you could just stand here and just relax, take a deep breath in and exhale. And then with each exhale, just feel this part, and especially focusing on the tailbone, just sinking and pulling down. And then this part pulling up slightly. Okay? But remember, everything should be nice and relaxed, just keeping that upright and straight spine. So a thing that you can do or drill is just get against the wall. And then, I could take this one, just for example. I might be a little weird because of the camera. But basically all you do is you just stand against the wall, and you don't have to have your heels touch completely, but just close enough, probably within an inch or two. And then start with the feet just like normal, bend the knees, and then try to lay your back against the wall. And then all you're gonna try to do is try to get that pelvic tilt, and then what you're gonna feel is the back will completely be aligned with the wall, okay? Then once you get that, you can step off, and then you should just be right there, okay? All right, sometimes if your feet are too far forward, then you get this, but you should be able to feel it from what we discussed in the very beginning, working with your feet first, okay, just starting there. All right, but that's a drill that you can do to try to get that spine aligned and completely flat against the wall. Another thing too that might help out is understanding it on the floor, so laying down, you know, just pulling the back to the ground because you do have to tilt your hips as well too, but all of that will align the spine. So there's a couple drills that you can do, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video, more in-depth look of a Wuchi slash square horse stance, both the same. But just try to work with that. Try to work with a small stance and then work a little bit wider. Remember, if you go wider, you're keeping the same exact principles and core concepts of a Wuchi, right? But you're just working a little bit more on your leg strength, okay? So, you know, start from a small stance and then progressively make it wider and wider. But remember, everything is within your comfort zone, and you know, just play around with it, okay? If you guys have any questions or any comments, please leave them in the comment section below or email me. I hope you guys like this. Please like, or you know, like I said, just subscribe earlier. That always keeps you up to date on newer content. But that is basically it for the in-depth look at the Wuchi square horse stance. So thank you guys once again, and I hope you guys enjoy.